The cabin pressure alarm pierced through the steady hum of the private jet's engines at 37,000 feet. In the luxurious forward cabin, passengers gripped their armrests as the aircraft shuddered violently, oxygen masks dropping from overhead compartments like mechanical spiders descending on silk threads. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, strained and urgent. "We're experiencing a critical system failure. All passengers remain seated and prepare for emergency descent." In seat 3A, Marcus Chen pressed his face against the oval window, watching the wing flaps struggle against invisible forces. His 8-year-old daughter Lily clutched her worn stuffed elephant, eyes wide with the kind of terror that only children can express with such raw honesty. "Daddy, are we going to crash?" she whispered, her small voice barely audible above the groaning metal and rushing air. Marcus tightened his grip on her hand, his calloused fingers a stark contrast to the polished leather seats surrounding them. He had saved for 3 years to afford these tickets, using every overtime shift and weekend repair job to give his daughter this one perfect trip to visit her grandmother. His mechanic's wages had stretched thin to purchase seats on what he thought was a standard commercial flight, not realizing until boarding that they were the only passengers on this private charter that had been oversold and consolidated. The plane lurched again, and from the cockpit came the sound of frantic radio chatter and electronic beeping. Marcus recognized the distress in the pilot's voice, the particular edge that came when trained professionals encountered something beyond their expertise. 20 rows behind them, in the aircraft's most exclusive cabin section, Alexander Rothschild adjusted his platinum cufflinks with practiced calm despite the chaos erupting around them. At 42, the technology mogul had weathered hostile takeovers, congressional hearings, and board revolts with the same unflappable composure he displayed now. His net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations, built through a combination of inherited wealth and ruthless business acumen that had transformed his family's traditional banking empire into a global technology conglomerate. The irony wasn't lost on him that his life might end in a machine, surrounded by the very innovations his companies had helped create. His assistant, Patricia, gripped her tablet with white knuckles, her usual efficiency replaced by barely controlled panic. "Sir, should I contact the emergency response team?" she asked, her voice maintaining professional courtesy, even as sweat beaded on her forehead. Alexander's gray eyes, sharp and calculating even in crisis, assessed the situation with the methodical precision that had made him billions. The aircraft's behavior suggested multiple system failures, possibly cascading through interconnected networks. His technical background, earned before inheriting his empire, allowed him to recognize patterns others might miss. "Not yet," he replied quietly. "Let's see how this develops." The plane dropped suddenly, a stomach-churning plunge that sent loose items flying through the cabin. Marcus instinctively shielded Lily, his body curving protectively around her small frame. The stuffed elephant tumbled to the floor, and as Marcus reached for it, he noticed something the other passengers had missed. The sound wasn't right. Aircraft engines produce specific harmonic frequencies, and the current noise suggested not just mechanical failure, but deliberate interference. His years maintaining helicopters for a private aviation company had taught him to diagnose problems through auditory cues alone. This wasn't random system failure. Someone or something was actively disrupting the aircraft's control systems. The cockpit door burst open, and Captain Rodriguez emerged, his pilot's uniform rumpled and sweat-stained. His 20 years of flying experience showed in his steady movements, despite the obvious fear in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with a situation I've never encountered before. Our navigation, communication, and control systems are failing simultaneously. It's as if something is jamming our signals." Marcus stood carefully, maintaining his balance as the plane continued its erratic behavior. "Captain, may I take a look? I have experience with aircraft systems." Rodriguez looked skeptical, taking in Marcus's worn jeans and faded work shirt. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but this requires specialized knowledge." "I've maintained rotorcraft avionics for 8 years, Marcus replied calmly. "Different platforms, same principles. Right now, you need every resource available." Before Rodriguez could respond, Alexander Rothschild appeared at Marcus's shoulder, his presence commanding attention despite the crisis. "Captain, Mr. Chen has excellent credentials. I suggest we listen to his assessment." The captain's eyebrows rose as he recognized the billionaire, but protocol won out over deference. "Very well. Follow me, but touch nothing without permission." The cockpit resembled a Christmas tree of warning lights, every system screaming alerts in different colors and tones. Marcus studied the displays with the focused intensity of someone whose livelihood depended on understanding complex mechanical relationships. His trained eye caught details the pilots had missed, patterns in the failure sequence that suggested external manipulation rather than internal malfunction. "This is cyber warfare," he announced after several minutes of careful observation. "Someone's using electromagnetic interference to disrupt your fly-by-wire systems. The good news is it's not permanent damage. The bad news is we need to isolate the affected circuits and switch to manual backup systems." Captain Rodriguez exchanged glances with his co-pilot. Manual backup systems weren't designed for sustained flight at this altitude. Even if they could maintain control, landing would require skills most modern pilots never developed. Alexander leaned forward, his business mind already calculating contingencies. "How long do we have?" Marcus pointed to several gauges showing rapidly declining readings. "Maybe 20 minutes before complete system failure. But if we can reroute power through the emergency circuits and bypass the compromised control modules, we might extend that to an hour. Enough time to reach an emergency airfield." The captain nodded grimly. "What do you need?" "Access to the avionics bay and someone who can follow detailed technical instructions." Marcus glanced back toward the passenger cabin where Lily waited, fear evident in her young face. "And I need to know my daughter will be safe while I'm working." Alexander's expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of humanity beneath his corporate armor. "I'll personally ensure her safety. You have my word." For the next 40 minutes, Marcus worked with the desperate intensity of a man whose child's life hung in the balance. His hands, scarred from years of mechanical work, moved with surprising delicacy through the aircraft's electronic nervous system. He bypassed compromised circuits, rerouted power through backup pathways, and gradually coaxed the dying aircraft back to a semblance of controllability. Alexander, despite his wealth and status, found himself serving as Marcus's assistant, following instructions with the humility of someone who recognized expertise regardless of its source. Together they traced circuits, tested connections, and slowly restored partial function to critical systems. The work was painstaking, requiring the kind of patience and precision that couldn't be hurried by money or influence. As Marcus soldered a crucial connection with makeshift tools adapted from the aircraft's emergency kit, Alexander found himself studying the man beside him. Here was someone whose annual salary wouldn't cover Alexander's monthly wine budget, yet whose knowledge was proving invaluable. More intriguing was Marcus's calm professionalism under pressure, the way he explained complex procedures clearly and concisely, never talking down to anyone despite his obvious expertise. When was the last time someone had taught Alexander something genuinely new, something that mattered more than quarterly earnings or market projections? The aircraft's behavior gradually stabilized as Marcus's repairs took hold. Warning lights began switching from red to amber, then to green. The artificial horizon leveled, and the altimeter showed a controlled descent rather than the previous chaotic plunging. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried new confidence as he announced their approach to a regional airport, praising the collaboration that had saved everyone aboard. As they prepared for landing, Alexander watched Marcus return to his daughter, scooping her into his arms with the tender relief of a parent who had faced the possibility of never holding his child again. Lily's eyes were bright with tears and pride as she hugged her father fiercely. "You saved everyone, Daddy," she whispered against his neck. Marcus's response was characteristic of his quiet nature. "We all work together, sweetheart. That's how the important things get done." Alexander observed this exchange with growing fascination. In his world, success was measured by market dominance and personal achievement. Collaboration existed only as a strategic necessity, and emotional connections were potential vulnerabilities to be managed. Yet here was a man who had just performed miracles through technical expertise and teamwork, who credited others for his own extraordinary contribution, who prioritized his daughter's emotional well-being over personal recognition. As the aircraft touched down safely on the emergency runway, fire trucks and ambulances racing alongside them as protocol required, Alexander made a decision that would surprise everyone who knew him. He approached Marcus as passengers prepared to disembark, his usual corporate confidence replaced by something more authentic. "Mr. Chen, I'd like to offer you a position with Rothschild Technologies, head of our emergency response division. The salary would be substantial, and we could arrange housing and schooling for your daughter." Marcus looked up from comforting Lily, confusion evident in his expression. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'm just a mechanic. You're a problem solver, Alexander corrected, and you have something I've spent billions trying to find. The ability to see solutions others miss, to work under pressure without losing focus, to lead without ego. Those skills are rarer than you know. The offer would change everything for Marcus and Lily. Financial security, educational opportunities, a chance to use his talents in ways he'd never imagined. But it would also mean leaving the simple life they'd built together, entering a world where Lily's father would travel constantly and face pressures that had nothing to do with mechanical repairs. Before Marcus could respond, Captain Rodriguez approached them both, his expression grave despite their successful landing. "Gentlemen, I've been in contact with aviation authorities. This wasn't a random system failure or even typical electromagnetic interference. Someone deliberately targeted this aircraft with military-grade jamming equipment. We're being investigated as a potential assassination attempt." The weight of this revelation settled over them as they disembarked into the bright afternoon sunlight. What had seemed like a mechanical emergency was something far more sinister. Alexander's face hardened as the implications became clear. His enemies were numerous and resourceful, spanning corporate rivals, foreign governments, and domestic political opponents who saw his influence as dangerous. Targeting civilian aircraft marked a significant escalation in the threats against him. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the aircraft's air conditioning. By helping save the plane, by demonstrating his capabilities, he had inadvertently inserted himself and Lily into a world of dangers he couldn't have imagined. The simple life he'd built for his daughter, carefully constructed to avoid exactly these kinds of complications, was about to become infinitely more complex. In the airport's private terminal, as investigators began their interviews and security personnel established protective protocols, Alexander and Marcus found themselves sitting across from each other in uncomfortable plastic chairs. The contrast between their worlds had never been more apparent, yet the shared experience of near death had created an unexpected bond. "I need to know something," Alexander said quietly, his voice carrying none of its usual commanding tone. "Why did you help? You could have stayed in your seat. Let the professionals handle it. You risked your life for strangers." Marcus considered the question, his hands absently smoothing Lily's hair as she dozed against his shoulder. "Because that's what you do," he said simply. "When people need help, you help them. It doesn't matter if they're rich or poor, whether you know them or not. It's just the right thing to do." The simplicity of this philosophy struck Alexander with unexpected force. His entire life had been built on complex calculations of advantage and disadvantage, risk and reward. Every relationship was transactional, every gesture calculated for maximum benefit. The idea of acting purely from moral obligation, without consideration of personal gain, was so foreign to his experience that it felt revolutionary. As federal investigators arrived to begin their formal inquiry, Alexander realized that the real emergency hadn't been the aircraft's system's failure. It had been his own failure to recognize what truly mattered. He had surrounded himself with wealth and power, while remaining essentially alone, protected by barriers that kept out both enemies and genuine human connection. Marcus Chen, with his worn clothes and calloused hands, possessed something Alexander's billions couldn't buy: the capacity for simple human decency and the trust of someone who loved him unconditionally. The investigation would reveal that the attack had indeed targeted Alexander specifically, using sophisticated electronic warfare techniques to disable the aircraft systems while making the failure appear accidental. The perpetrators were never identified conclusively, though evidence pointed toward a consortium of competitors who had combined resources to eliminate what they saw as Alexander's monopolistic influence in emerging technologies. The attack's failure had been due entirely to the presence of Marcus Chen, an unplanned variable in what should have been a perfectly executed assassination. In the days that followed, Marcus would decline Alexander's initial job offer, but accept his friendship, a relationship that would prove more valuable than any employment contract. Alexander would discover that having someone in his life who expected nothing from him except honesty and decency was more precious than any business acquisition. Their daughters would become best friends, bridging worlds that seemed impossibly far apart with the easy acceptance that only children possess. But all of that lay ahead as they sat in the terminal's harsh, fluorescent lighting, surrounded by investigators and security personnel. Two men from different worlds trying to understand how a mechanical crisis had become the beginning of something neither had expected to find: genuine human connection in a world that seemed designed to prevent exactly that kind of discovery. The late afternoon sun streamed through the terminal windows as Marcus watched federal agents interview other passengers. their questions revealing the scope of what they'd survived. Agent Sarah Martinez, lead investigator for the Transportation Security Administration's Cybercrime Division, approached them with files thick enough to suggest this wasn't the first attack of its kind. The electronic signature matches 3 previous incidents involving high-value targets, she explained, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who'd seen too many sophisticated assassination attempts. This was professional work, well-funded and carefully planned. Mr. Rothschild, you've been targeted by people with significant resources and advanced technical capabilities. Alexander nodded, unsurprised by the confirmation of what he'd already suspected. His companies, work in artificial intelligence and quantum computing, had made him enemies among both legitimate competitors and state actors, who viewed his innovations as threats to their own technological superiority. The surprise wasn't the attempt itself, but its failure due to the presence of someone whose skills exactly matched the attack's vulnerabilities. What troubles me, Agent Martinez continued, is how specifically this attack was designed. The jamming frequencies targeted the exact aircraft systems that would create maximum chaos while maintaining plausible deniability. Someone had detailed knowledge of this particular aircraft's electronic architecture. Marcus looked up from comforting Lily, his mechanical mind processing the implications. You're saying this wasn't random. They knew which plane we'd be on, knew its specifications, knew exactly how to disable it. The precision required suggests inside information. Agent Martinez confirmed his assessment with a grim nod. We're investigating all ground crew, maintenance personnel, and flight planning staff. But Mr. Chen, your intervention wasn't part of their calculations. They planned for system failure and pilot error, not for a passenger with your specific expertise. The weight of inadvertent heroism settled on Marcus's shoulders like an unwelcome burden. He'd acted instinctively, using skills honed through years of honest work, never imagining that his knowledge would disrupt someone's carefully orchestrated plan. Now his simple life was complicated by the attention of powerful people who preferred their problems solved with permanent solutions. Alexander watched Marcus process this information and recognized the internal struggle. Here was a man who'd sought invisibility for himself and his daughter, who'd chosen modest employment specifically to avoid the complications that came with high-stakes environments. Yet, circumstances had thrust him into exactly the kind of dangerous spotlight he'd worked to avoid. I can arrange protection, Alexander offered quietly. My security team is among the best in the world. You and Lily would be safe while the investigation continues. Marcus shook his head, the gesture carrying years of hard-earned independence. I appreciate the offer, but we don't need protecting. We need to disappear back into our normal life. That's not going to be possible, Agent Martinez interjected. These people failed to eliminate their primary target because of your intervention. In their calculation, you're now as much a threat as Mr. Rothschild himself. They'll want to correct their mistake. The stark reality of their situation crystallized as investigators continued their work around them. Marcus had saved lives through his expertise, but in doing so had painted a target on himself and his daughter. Alexander had survived another assassination attempt, but now carried responsibility for the innocent man who'd saved him. Both men faced choices that would define not just their own futures, but their daughters as well. As evening approached, airport security made arrangements for them to remain in the secure terminal overnight while investigators completed their initial work. Marcus helped Lily settle into a makeshift sleeping area, created from waiting room chairs, her stuffed elephant once again providing comfort in an uncertain world. She drifted off with the resilience of childhood, trusting her father to handle whatever complicated adult problems surrounded them. Alexander found himself unable to sleep, instead studying financial reports on his tablet while keeping one eye on the father and daughter across the waiting area. His usual ability to focus on business seemed compromised by thoughts about what he owed this man who'd asked for nothing except the safety of his child. His companies employed thousands of people, but he struggled to think of anyone whose motivations were as transparently honest as Marcus Chen's had proven to be. Near midnight, Marcus approached Alexander's impromptu workspace, moving carefully to avoid disturbing other stranded passengers. I've been thinking about your job offer, he said quietly. Not because I want it, but because I need to understand what you really want from me. Alexander closed his tablet, recognizing the importance of this conversation. I want someone I can trust completely, he said simply. In my world, everyone wants something. Money, access, influence, connections. You helped save my life and asked for nothing in return. That's rarer than you might think. But what you're really offering is a chance to use my skills in a bigger arena, Marcus observed. More complex problems, higher stakes, better resources. You think I'm wasted as a mechanic. Not wasted, Alexander corrected. Underutilized. You have gifts that could solve problems affecting millions of people. But I also understand why you've chosen simplicity. After what happened today, I understand it better than I did this morning. The conversation was interrupted by Agent Martinez, who approached them with new information. We've identified the source of the jamming signal, she announced. Military-grade equipment, probably truck-mounted, positioned along your flight path. The sophistication suggests state-level resources, not private contractors. This changes everything, Alexander realized. Corporate espionage was one thing, but foreign government involvement meant the stakes were international. His work in quantum encryption and artificial intelligence had military applications that several nations viewed as threats to their own strategic interests. Marcus felt the walls of his simple world crumbling further. State actors didn't forget witnesses or leave loose ends untied. The choice was no longer between accepting Alexander's job offer or returning to his old life. The choice was between accepting protection or living as perpetual fugitives. Over the following days, as the investigation expanded and media attention intensified, Marcus and Lily found themselves guests in Alexander's heavily secured penthouse while arrangements were made for their long-term safety. The luxury surrounded them like an alien environment, beautiful but sterile, lacking the warmth of their small apartment with its second-hand furniture and Lily's artwork covering the refrigerator. Lily adapted to the opulence with a child's pragmatism, more interested in the building's rooftop garden than the priceless art collection. She made friends with Alexander's household staff, who were charmed by her curiosity and unaffected manner. Marcus watched his daughter navigate this new world with mixed emotions, proud of her resilience while worried about the lessons she might learn from such extreme privilege. Alexander, meanwhile, found himself fascinated by the changes Marcus and Lily brought to his sterile environment. Meals became social occasions rather than business meetings. Evening conversations focused on books and ideas, rather than market analysis and strategic planning. For the first time in years, his home felt lived in, rather than merely occupied. The job offer evolved through these conversations into something more substantial than either man had originally envisioned. Rather than traditional employment, Alexander proposed a partnership that would allow Marcus to solve complex technical problems while maintaining the independence he valued. The work would be project-based, well-compensated, and flexible enough to accommodate Lily's needs and Marcus's desire for meaningful rather than merely profitable achievements. The arrangement would also address their security concerns through legitimate business channels rather than hiding. Marcus would become a visible but protected figure in Alexander's organization, his expertise acknowledged and valued, while his family's safety was ensured through professional rather than personal obligations. The partnership began with a project that showcased Marcus's unique perspective on technological problems. Alexander's companies had struggled for months with an artificial intelligence system that couldn't adapt to unexpected variables in manufacturing processes. Traditional programmers approached the problem through code optimization and algorithm refinement, but Marcus recognized it as essentially a mechanical issue disguised as a software problem. I needed to understand physical systems the way an experienced mechanic understood engines, through pattern recognition that incorporated both theoretical knowledge and intuitive feel for how complex systems behaved under stress. His solution involved teaching the artificial intelligence to diagnose problems the way he'd learned to diagnose aircraft issues, through careful observation of subtle indicators that revealed underlying conditions. The breakthrough transformed not just a specific manufacturing problem, but Alexander's entire approach to human-machine interaction in industrial applications. Word of Marcus's innovative methodologies spread through Alexander's network of contacts, leading to consulting requests from aerospace companies, automotive manufacturers, and defense contractors. His reputation grew not as a traditional engineer or programmer, but as someone who could bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application, who could see solutions that eluded specialists focused on narrow technical domains. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways Marcus hadn't experienced since his military service, when complex problems required immediate solutions that balanced multiple competing factors. Yet it also allowed him to maintain the hands-on approach he'd always preferred, working with actual systems rather than abstract models. Lily thrived in her new environment, attending a private school, where her natural curiosity was encouraged and her father's growing reputation opened doors to advanced programs in science and engineering. She began displaying mechanical aptitude that mirrored Marcus's own childhood fascination with how things worked, spending afternoons in Alexander's workshops learning to use sophisticated tools and equipment. The friendship between the two men deepened through shared challenges and mutual respect. Alexander learned to value Marcus's perspective on business decisions, finding that someone who'd lived paycheck to paycheck understood market realities that boardroom theories often missed. Marcus discovered that Alexander's wealth, properly directed, could solve problems that individual effort couldn't address, from funding educational programs for disadvantaged children to supporting research into sustainable technologies. Their partnership attracted attention from competitors and enemies who saw their collaboration as a threat to established power structures. The combination of Alexander's resources and Marcus's innovative thinking created solutions that disrupted traditional industry approaches, making both men targets for those who profited from maintaining the status quo. But they also attracted allies, people who recognized the value of their unorthodox partnership and wanted to support its expansion. A year after the aircraft incident, Marcus and Alexander had built something unprecedented in corporate America, a true partnership between equals from radically different backgrounds, united by complementary skills and shared values rather than financial necessity or strategic advantage. Their success challenged assumptions about class, education, and the nature of innovation itself, proving that the most creative solutions often emerged from combining different perspectives rather than concentrating similar expertise. The attack that had brought them together became the foundation for a relationship that transformed both their lives and the lives of everyone around them. Marcus discovered that his mechanical skills were just one aspect of a broader gift for systematic thinking that could be applied to problems far beyond aircraft repair. Alexander learned that genuine human connection was not a vulnerability to be managed, but a strength that enhanced every other aspect of his life and work. Their daughters grew up as sisters, bridging the gap between their fathers, worlds with the easy acceptance that only children possess. They would inherit not just wealth or working-class values, but a demonstrated proof that people from different backgrounds could create something together that neither could achieve alone. The legacy of that terrifying afternoon at 37,000 feet extended far beyond the immediate crisis they'd survived, becoming instead the beginning of a story about what becomes possible when competence meets opportunity, when genuine need encounters genuine capability, and when two people discover that their differences are not barriers, but complementary strengths that create possibilities neither could have imagined alone. 5 years later, Marcus stood in the executive conference room of Rothschild Technologies' newest facility, addressing a group of aerospace engineers who'd been struggling with autonomous aircraft safety systems for months. His presentation drew on lessons learned from that emergency landing, but also from hundreds of subsequent projects that had expanded his understanding of how human intuition could enhance technological precision. The engineers listened with the respectful attention accorded to someone whose practical experience had saved lives and revolutionized industries. Behind him, sophisticated displays showed aircraft systems that incorporated his innovations in predictive maintenance and emergency response protocols, technologies now standard throughout the aviation industry. His work had made flying safer for millions of passengers, yet he maintained the humility that had first impressed Alexander years earlier. In the audience, Alexander watched his partner explain complex concepts with the same clarity he'd brought to that desperate repair session high above the earth. Their friendship had evolved into the most successful collaboration of Alexander's career, generating innovations that had transformed multiple industries while maintaining the human focus that made their work meaningful rather than merely profitable. Their companies now employed thousands of people in jobs that balanced technological sophistication with human dignity, proving that advanced automation could enhance rather than replace human capabilities. Lily, now 13, attended the presentation with the confident attention of someone who'd grown up around such discussions. She understood the technical details better than most adults, but more importantly, she'd absorbed the lesson that real achievement came from serving others rather than personal advancement. Her father's example had taught her that expertise carried responsibility, and that the greatest satisfaction came from using one's gifts to solve problems that mattered. After the presentation, as Marcus answered questions from engineers eager to understand his methodology, Alexander reflected on how completely their lives had changed. The attack that had brought them together now seemed like destiny rather than coincidence, a crisis that had revealed potential neither man had recognized in himself. They'd built something unprecedented, A partnership that proved the American dream's promise that merit and character mattered more than background or privilege. The success had brought new challenges, including ongoing security concerns and the constant attention that came with public prominence. But it had also brought rewards that couldn't be measured in financial terms: the satisfaction of meaningful work, the security of genuine friendship, and the knowledge that their collaboration had made the world measurably better for countless people they would never meet. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Marcus paused at the window overlooking the research facility's runway, where aircraft incorporating their safety innovations landed and departed in routine operations that would have been impossible without the systems they'd developed together. The view reminded him of that terrifying afternoon when everything had changed, when a mechanical emergency had become an opportunity that transformed 2 lives and countless others. "You never regret accepting that job offer?" Alexander asked, joining him at the window. Marcus smiled, thinking of Lily's laughter echoing through their comfortable home, of the challenging projects that made each day interesting, of the security that let him focus on solutions rather than survival. "Best decision I ever made," he replied, "though I still maintain you're the one who benefited most from the deal." Alexander laughed, a sound that had become more frequent over the years as he'd learned to balance business success with personal happiness. Their partnership had taught him that the most valuable acquisitions couldn't be purchased, only earned through trust and proven through consistent action. Outside the window, another aircraft touched down safely on the runway, its systems incorporating innovations born from their collaboration and tested in the crucible of genuine crisis. Neither man could have imagined, during those desperate minutes at 37,000 feet, that their emergency repairs would become the foundation for a relationship that proved the most important problems were solved not by individuals working alone, but by people who brought different strengths together in service of something greater than their personal interests. The aircraft that had nearly killed them had instead given them the opportunity to discover what became possible when competence met opportunity, when genuine need encountered authentic capability, and when 2 people from different worlds found common ground in shared values and complementary skills. Their story continued, written in innovations that saved lives, in technologies that enhanced human potential, and in the example they set for their daughters and everyone around them, that the most meaningful success came from using one's gifts in service of others. The emergency was over, but the collaboration it had sparked would continue for the rest of their lives, proving that sometimes the most important journeys begin with the most unexpected departures.